Hey everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling Genesis 1 and 2,
Oh, yeah, the big one.
the creation story that's been kind of inspiring art and, debate for centuries.
It's incredible how impactful just these couple chapters have been. I mean, it's like a window into how ancient people saw the world, but it's also about these huge questions about, existence itself. And those questions are just as relevant to us now.
You're totally right. And that is exactly what we're going to do today. Really unpack all that good stuff, the symbolism, the hidden meanings. And we'll even talk about some of the, scholarly debates surrounding these texts. But don't worry, we'll make sure to keep it light and fun, like your favorite cup of coffee. So buckle up. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Day 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, there was morning, the first day.
It's so easy to just kind of skim over this part, but it really sets up a major theme here. Order from chaos. The ancient world often saw the universe as this like chaotic sea, and here we see God imposing order, which is an idea that we find in a lot of different creation myths.
Yeah, it's like a cosmic cleaning spree, bringing structure to like the formless void. So what happens on day 2? And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. Wait, a vault. Is that where the ancient idea of the flat earth and a dome-like sky comes from?
Well, it's not quite that simple. The firmament or the vault was this thought of as a solid barrier, separating the waters of earth from the heavenly realm. So it's less like a flat ceiling and more like an upside down bowl.
Interesting. Our understanding of the universe has changed so much over time.
For sure. And it helps to remember that, these texts, they weren't trying to be scientific. It was more about describing this divine act of creation through an ancient worldview.
That makes sense. All right, day 3. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. So land, sea, and plants. But wait a minute. Still no sun. I mean, how can plants even exist before the sun?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's important to remember that Genesis is using this poetic language and symbolism to,
Yes.
convey a theological message. It's not necessarily a chronological or scientific account.
Okay. So it's more about this grand idea of creation unfolding, not a strict timeline. But isn't that kind of confusing for people reading this today?
It can be, especially for those who, come at it from a very literal perspective. But that's what makes it so fun to explore these different layers of meaning.
Totally. Let's move on to day 4. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, days, and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 4th day. There we go. Sun, moon, and stars, finally. But they're not just sources of light, they're markers of time, too.
This highlights how ancient people saw the cosmos as totally intertwined with human life and religious practices. The heavens weren't just something distant, they actually influenced what happened here on Earth.
Right, like a cosmic clock and calendar, all rolled into one. This feels less like a science textbook and more like a cosmic poem.
Exactly. And some scholars point out that the order of creation in Genesis actually echoes some ancient Mesopotamian creation myths.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like we're piecing together an ancient puzzle, seeing how these ideas kind of traveled and evolved over time. This deep dive is already blowing my mind. Okay, what's next? And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living thing with which the water teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to his kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water in the seas and let birds increase on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day.
Day 5 brings us all these creatures of the water
Yeah.
and birds soaring above. And again, we see, according to their kinds, this idea of distinct kinds is really important for understanding the ancient view of creation. It's like God is setting boundary or
Yeah.
categories for all the different life forms.
Interesting how different that is from our modern understanding of evolution and the interconnectedness of all life.
Absolutely. But, within the text, it really emphasizes this divine order and purpose behind each creation.
Okay, so now it's day 6, time for humans to enter the scene. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. There it is. Humans created in the image of God. That's got to be like one of the most debated phrases in religious history, right?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, what does that even mean? To be made in the image of God. So many different interpretations. Some people say it's about our ability to reason or our creativity or,
Right.
our moral conscience. Others see it as a call to be like stewards of the earth, taking care of creation.
Wow. So it's not just about physically looking like God, but about something much deeper, like inheriting a divine spark or a responsibility. That's a lot to think about. But before we go too deep down that rabbit hole, let's move on to day 7. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. And seen, God rests. Creation is complete. But even in resting, there's a deeper meaning, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This isn't just God taking a nap. It's about establishing the Sabbath, this day of rest and reflection. As like a foundational element of what it means to be human, it shows that even God, this ultimate creator, needs to take a break. So we can definitely, feel good about taking time to recharge ourselves.
That's a really nice thought, especially in our world where everyone's always on the go. It's like a divine permission slip to slow down, appreciate what we've accomplished, or at least catch up on some sleep. But we're not done yet. Still got the Garden of Eden to explore,
Oh,
and Adam and Eve.
yes, that story's just getting started. Genesis 2 zooms in on creation, shows us this more intimate look at the relationship between humans and God and the natural world.
It's like we're trading our telescopes for magnifying glasses, ready to examine the finer details.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We'll be back in a flash to explore the creation of Adam and Eve and that fateful encounter with the serpent. We're just getting warmed up in our deep dive into Genesis.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, in Genesis 2, we move from this big picture view of creation to the more intimate setting of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, it's like we're trading our telescopes for magnifying glasses, ready to zoom in on those finer details. So where do we pick up the story?
Well, Genesis 2 starts with this different perspective on the creation of humans. Let's hear about Adam's formation.
Okay, this is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. But streams came up from the earth, and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into 4 headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Asher. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So Adam's made from dust and placed in this amazing garden paradise. But hold on, there's a bit of detail here about rivers in specific places. Is this supposed to be like a literal map of Eden?
That's a question that's puzzled scholars for ages. Some see it as this symbolic landscape, representing the abundance and fertility of creation, while others try to match up those rivers with real places. But it's pretty tricky.
It's like a mythical geography almost, blending real-world stuff with something otherworldly.
Exactly. And that mystery is part of what makes Eden so captivating. This place we all kind of long for, a symbol of harmony with nature and with the divine. But as we'll see, that harmony is fragile.
So true. And speaking of harmony, or lack thereof, let's talk about Eve. I'm ready for some creation drama. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them, and whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. So Adam gets a companion, made from his own rib. That's a pretty unique way to start a partnership.
It really is. Such a powerful image. And, it's led to tons of different interpretations. Some see it as this symbol of equality, coming from a shared origin, while others focus on that idea of woman as a helper, emphasizing a more complementary partnership.
It's interesting how one verse can spark so much debate about gender roles and how men and women relate to each other.
Absolutely. Shows how these ancient texts are always being read through the lens of today's culture.
All right, so Adam and Eve are in this perfect garden, surrounded by all these cool animals, but there's that one rule: don't eat from the tree of knowledge. What's the deal with that?
The forbidden fruit. It's a classic story element in myths and literature. Represents that allure of the unknown, the temptation to go beyond the limits.
Totally get that. Like when someone says, don't open that door, it just makes you want to open it even more.
Exactly. And some scholars argue that this tree of knowledge represents that human desire for autonomy, that urge to decide good and evil for ourselves instead of relying on God's authority.
Woo. Adds a whole other layer to the story. So what happens when curiosity gets the better of Adam and Eve? Let's hear about that encounter with the serpent. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Oh, here comes the serpent. Smooth talker extraordinaire, questions God's command, tempts Eve with knowledge and power, and bam! They take a bite of that forbidden fruit. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
I know, right? Such a relatable story, though. I mean, we've all faced those tempting offers, those moments where it's like, do I obey the rules or do I follow what I want?
Oh, for sure. And just like Adam and Eve, we often end up with that, oh no, what have I done feeling. But you know what always gets me? It's Adam's reaction when God finds out. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Classic blame game. It wasn't me, it was the woman.
It's almost funny, but also so human.
Totally. It's that instinct we all have to avoid taking responsibility,
Yeah.
to blame someone else, even when we made the choice. Well, I've definitely been there. Like that time well, maybe I'll save that story for another episode.
Probably a good idea. But you're right. This story resonates because it shows those human flaws. We see ourselves in Adam and Eve, their curiosity, the temptation, and ultimately their bad choices.
So what happens next? Does God forgive them, punish them, send them to their rooms without dinner?
Let's find out. Genesis 2 ends with the consequences of their disobedience, and it's not pretty.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone from the huge scale of creation to the intimate Garden of Eden, exploring the origins of everything.
And the real question is, what do these ancient stories have to say to us today?
Yeah, that's the big question. Why should we care about Adam and Eve and talking snakes and forbidden fruit? I mean, it feels a bit archaic, doesn't it?
Well, it might seem that way, but the power of these stories is how they tap into these, universal human experiences. They grapple with themes that are just as relevant now as they were back then.
Right, like creation, temptation, choice, consequence, the search for meaning and purpose.
Exactly. Those themes are woven into what it means to be human.
I see what you mean, regardless of your background or beliefs.
Precisely. Take, for example, the idea of being created in God's image. Whether you take that literally or metaphorically, it speaks to the value and dignity of every person.
That's a powerful message, especially these days when those values are challenged so much.
Yeah.
Reminds us that we're all connected and that we need to treat each other with, respect and compassion.
Right. And then there's the concept of the fall, that moment when Adam and Eve disobey God and are kicked out of paradise. On one level, it's about the consequences of our choices and how our actions affect ourselves and others.
Yeah, like that feeling when you realize you messed up and there's no going back.
We've all been there. But the fall can also be seen as a metaphor for the human condition itself. We can do great things, but we also make mistakes. We're selfish. We stray from the right path.
So it's not just about leaving a garden, but about those struggles and challenges we all face, trying to live up to our ideals, but also knowing we're not perfect.
Exactly. And even within that struggle, there's hope. Genesis shows us that even when we mess up, we're not abandoned. God still cares for Adam and Eve, giving them clothes and a way forward.
Like a reminder that even when we stumble, we can get back up, learn from it, and find a new way forward. It's not about going back to some perfect past, but about finding meaning and purpose in the world we live in now.
Beautifully said. And one of the most amazing things about Genesis is that it's open to so many different interpretations. People have been debating the meaning of these stories for centuries, drawing different lessons and finding their own personal connections.
That's what makes it so engaging. These texts aren't just static stories. They're living, breathing things that change in meaning as we bring our own experiences and perspectives to them.
Absolutely. And that's what we hope you've experienced in this deep dive. We haven't given you all the answers, but we've opened up a space for you to explore, to wrestle with these ideas and see how they connect to your own life.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis 1 and 2, what's the one question you'd like to leave our listeners with?
What does this creation story mean to you today? How does it shape how you see the world, your place in it, and the choices you make?
That's a great question, and one that I hope our listeners will really think about. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through Genesis.
It's always a pleasure to explore these timeless stories.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep diving deep.